Waiting for James at the bus stop, I watched the waves roll in from the Pacific, each one a quiet echo of the life I used to know. It's strange how the most ordinary moments, like standing on a street corner, can stir up memories that feel like entire lifetimes. My name is Wendy Boone. I'm 26 years old, a nurse, a mother, and a wife. But before all that, I was just a girl in Bakersfield, California, falling in love with a boy named Tom. We met in 10th grade. He had a crooked smile and a quiet confidence that made me feel safe. His family was warm, especially his mother Alice, who treated me like I'd always belonged. When Tom and I got engaged, she was ecstatic. She threw us a party, hugged me tight, and said, "You're the daughter I never got to have." Tom was her only child, and I think she saw our union as a kind of expansion, her family growing in a way she'd always hoped for. Tom became a firefighter. I finished nursing school. Life felt like it was unfolding exactly as it should. When he got hired in Laguna Beach, it was bittersweet. His mom was sad to see him go, but proud. My parents had moved there too, chasing my dad's dream of opening a beachside restaurant. It felt like fate. When we told her we were expecting, she was over the moon. Not pushy, just present. She sent little gifts, knitted a rainbow blanket, and told me she couldn't wait to hold her grandbaby. We planned for her to come down a week before my due date, July 20th, and stay for the first month. Then everything changed. When COVID first hit, I was 6 months pregnant and still working part-time as a nurse. I'd already cut my hours back, trying to balance the demands of the hospital with the quiet, growing life inside me. But the tension in the hallways was rising, staff bracing for the unknown, protocols shifting by the hour, and whispers of ventilator shortages echoing through break rooms. Every shift felt heavier, like I was walking through fog with weights on my chest. I was exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. The risk was growing, and so was my baby. By April, I made the decision to take a formal leave of absence. It wasn't easy. Nursing had always been more than a job. It was my rhythm, my purpose, my way of showing up for the world. But now I had someone new to show up for. Someone I hadn't even met yet, but who needed me more than anyone else ever had. Tom supported me without hesitation. He was still working full-time as a firefighter, facing his own frontline battles. Every night, he came home and stripped down at the door, showered immediately, and held me like he could shield us both from everything outside. We didn't say much in those moments, but the silence was full of love and fear and quiet resolve. That leave of absence would roll into my maternity leave soon enough. But in that moment, it felt like stepping away from one world to fully enter another, one where every breath, every heartbeat, was shared between me and the tiny life growing inside me. We tried to stay hopeful. My due date was fast approaching, and we had plans. Alice would come down, stay for a month, help us settle into parenthood. She was so excited, sending little gifts, knitting little sweaters, calling me her daughter. But as the pandemic deepened, something shifted in her. At first, Alice brushed off the virus like it was a passing headline. "It's just media hype," she said, waving away our concern with the same ease she used to fold laundry or stir soup. But it didn't stop there. Soon, she was deep in the face mask debates, sharing articles with questionable sources, reposting videos filled with misinformation, and quoting theories that made our stomachs turn. Her TikTok page became her stage. She filmed herself being turned away from stores, confronting employees, declaring her right to breathe freely, and accusing the world of silencing her. The woman who once knitted rainbow blankets and sent gentle texts about baby names was now shouting into the void, convinced she was a martyr. It was heartbreaking. We tried to talk to her. Gently at first, then more firmly. We sent her real medical data, offered to answer her questions, reminded her that I was a nurse and Tom a first responder. But she wouldn't hear it. She was no longer listening, only broadcasting. And with every post, every video, we felt her slipping further away. Then she got sick. She insisted it was just a cold. Maybe the flu. But it wasn't. She passed it to her husband, who ended up in the hospital. Then came June 20th and everything shifted. I woke to a dull ache low in my back. I chalked it up to the usual discomfort of late pregnancy, the kind you learn to live with. But as the morning wore on, the pain sharpened, rhythmic, pulsing, relentless. Labor. Too soon. A flutter of panic rose in my chest. I wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. We were still weeks away from the due date. Tom grabbed the hospital bag. We masked up and rushed out the door, the streets hauntingly still, like the world was holding its breath. Inside the hospital, tension hung in the air, staff moving quickly, quietly, stretched to their limits. Every room held someone battling a virus we barely understood. The doctors didn't hesitate. Emergency C-section. This baby was coming early, and they weren't going to risk waiting. I remember the chill of the operating room, the sterile hum of machines, Tom's hand wrapped tightly around mine. And then he was here, lifted into the light. So small, so pink, crying. We named him James. He weighed just under 5 pounds, but he was fierce. His lungs worked. His heart was strong. He was healthy. I broke. Tears poured out, relief, joy, terror, gratitude, all crashing over me at once. In that moment, the world outside disappeared. No virus. No fear. Just James. Just us. After James was born, I stayed in the hospital for just one day. Not because I was ready, but because I was healthy, and so was he. The hospital was overwhelmed with COVID cases, and they wanted to protect us. I understood. Still, leaving so soon after a C-section felt like stepping into a storm with no umbrella. But James was strong. Tiny, yes, but his lungs were clear, his heartbeat steady, and his eyes already searching for light. He was perfect. Tom had arranged to take 8 weeks of parental leave. The moment we got home, he stepped into his new role with quiet strength, changing diapers, holding James while I rested. He was my anchor, and I don't know how I would have made it through without him. And then my mom came. Her restaurant had shut down, so she packed up and came to stay with us. She didn't hesitate. She brought groceries, folded laundry, and filled our home with warmth. She held James like he was made of magic. The days after James's birth were quiet, healing, and full of love. Tom was home on parental leave, my mom was healthy and present, and our little family was beginning to find its rhythm. And then the call came. Alice was ecstatic. She was practically bubbling through the phone, her voice full of excitement, saying she and Tom's dad were finally coming down. His father had just been discharged from the hospital, and they were planning to drive through the night. We should be there by 6, she said, like it was a countdown to Christmas morning. But something was wrong. When we asked about their health, she brushed it off. We're fine, she said. We just had a little cold. But we knew better. They had tested positive for COVID. His dad had just been released from the hospital. And we had a newborn. We told her gently, firmly, they couldn't come inside. Not yet. Not until they had a clean bill of health. And even then, they would need to quarantine in a hotel for 24 hours before seeing us or holding James. She was furious. She said we had promised. That COVID wasn't a big deal. That we were buying into the hype. She accused me of poisoning her son with fear, that as a nurse, I was part of the problem. A spreader of fake media. A puppet of the system. I stood my ground. Tom did too. We told her this wasn't about politics or opinions. It was about protecting our baby. About keeping our home safe. About doing what was right, even when it hurt. She hung up angry. I was hurt. And I cried. Not because I doubted our decision, but because it's hard to draw a line in the sand when love is on the other side of it. It's hard to be the gatekeeper of your child's safety when it means shutting out someone who once called you her daughter. But we did it. For James. For each other. The next morning, Tom sat beside me on the bed, James nestled in his arms, and said, I'm going to FaceTime her. I nodded. Her face lit up the moment she saw him, and then she saw James tiny, sleepy, wrapped in a blue blanket. Her eyes welled up. He's perfect, she whispered. Tom spoke gently, but firmly. Mom, we can't risk anything right now. But I want you to be part of this. Every day. So here's what we're going to do. He promised they'd FaceTime daily, that she could watch James grow, hear his little coos, and see his first smiles. And if she agreed not to post a single picture online, we'll send them privately, just for you and Dad. But we've decided not to make any public announcements for now. James will remain our little secret, with no social media posts or birth announcements cluttering the internet until we know everyone is safe and ready to celebrate, he explained to her. She agreed instantly. I just want to see him, she said. I won't share anything. I promise. Then Tom called his dad, a retired carpenter who still used a flip phone until recently, and walked him through how to download the photos, open FaceTime, and hold the phone so James's face wouldn't be upside down. It took a while, with a handful of "can you hear me now" moments. Tom glanced at his dad's frail frame and drawn features. He didn't look well, not at all like someone freshly discharged from the hospital. But when his dad finally saw James on the screen, that tiredness vanished. He smiled like a man who'd just built the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. That night, we sent the first photo. James asleep, one tiny fist curled under his cheek. No filters. No captions. Just love. The next 2 days brought a quiet unease. Tom's mom kept insisting she was fine, but we could see it, her face flushed, her voice raspy, the cough that lingered between sentences. She was sweating through her shirts, but she smiled every time she saw James. She was content, she said, just seeing him this way. We sent more photos. One of James in the bath, his tiny toes kicking up bubbles. One of me breastfeeding, his little hand resting on my chest. We didn't think twice about it. All our calls had been in the nursery or our bedroom, soft, intimate spaces filled with love. But one morning, everything changed. We were in the kitchen, FaceTiming like usual, when my mom walked in, still in her pajamas, reaching for the kettle to make her morning tea. She waved sleepily at the screen, unaware of the storm about to break. Alice froze. Her face twisted. Her voice rose. So she gets to be there? She gets to bond first? Is that it? We tried to explain. That my mom hadn't had COVID. That she'd been here helping since before James was born. That this wasn't about favoritism, it was about safety. But she wouldn't hear it. You planned this, she said. You hate me. You want to hurt me. She screamed. Tom's face went pale. I felt my chest tighten. Then she screamed, you gave me COVID on purpose. I hadn't. I hadn't even been to Bakersfield since the pandemic began. I hadn't had COVID. I was a nurse, I knew how to protect myself and others. But none of that mattered in that moment. She hung up. The screen went black. The silence was deafening. Then the calls started. The first was from Tom's aunt, his mother's sister. Her voice trembled with hurt. If one grandma isn't allowed to visit, she said, then the other shouldn't be either. We tried to explain about the quarantine plan, the risks, the pediatrician's advice, but she wasn't interested in the details. She sighed, heavy and disappointed, and hung up. Then came Tom's uncle, accusing me of manipulating his nephew into disowning his own parents. The cousins were a mix of confusion and surprise. Some hadn't even known I was pregnant, let alone that James had arrived. Others had only heard from Tom's mom, who'd been calling around in tears, saying her son had cut her off because his cruel wife hated her. It was surreal. Just 2 years ago, we'd all laughed together at the family reunion. Now, we were repeating the same explanation over and over. James's safety came first. No visits until everyone had been tested. Each time I spoke, my voice cracked a little more. We spent hours fielding group texts and phone calls. That night, I sat on the nursery floor, hunched over my phone, tears streaking down my face as the screen lit up with new notifications. All from my mother-in-law. She accused me of plotting this since high school. Said I'd never liked her. That I was isolating Tom from his family on purpose. Each message felt like a blade. I sobbed into my hand, my vision blurred, my heart pounding with every ping. I scrolled through her words, stunned by how quickly love had curdled into suspicion. I typed out another apology. Another justification. Even though I knew we'd do it all again if it meant keeping James safe. Tom and I sat in the nursery, the soft glow of our phones casting long shadows on the crib walls. We held each other close, our son sleeping peacefully between us, unaware of the storm his birth had stirred. We felt the guilt of hurting people we cared about, but beneath it all, we knew we'd made the right choice. And we'd make it again. Then we had a day of silence. No calls, no texts, just the quiet hum of the house and James's soft breathing as he napped. For the first time in weeks, it felt like the storm had passed. We didn't say it out loud, but both of us were starting to believe we might be okay. That's when the phone rang. It was Miss Givens, one of Alice's old book club friends. They hadn't spoken in months, ever since Alice started posting wild theories about COVID, and Miss Givens quietly distanced herself. But she was calling now to warn us. She'd seen what Alice had been posting online, and it wasn't just about the virus anymore. It was about us. We thanked her, and we tried to log onto Alice's Instagram, but we were blocked. Tom remembered he had an old second account, one he'd used years ago for local volunteer work. He logged in, and there it was. Her feed had become a public diary of rage. Post after post called us out by name, accusing us of isolating her, of keeping James away because we were brainwashed by fake news. She linked to articles about care home neglect during COVID, twisting them into proof that we were cruel. One post showed a selfie with the caption, "Perfectly healthy." But her face told a different story. Pale, exhausted, glassy-eyed. Her skin blotchy. Her expression hollow. Then we found her TikTok. It was worse. She'd screen-recorded nearly every FaceTime call, dozens of them. Some were raw and unedited, just her talking to James. But others had been clipped and stitched together to make Tom and me look cold, dismissive, even cruel. She'd added music, captions, dramatic filters. One video showed James yawning with the caption, "He's tired of being kept from me." I sat down, stunned. The woman who used to knit tiny socks for James had turned our lives into a twisted narrative for strangers to consume. Every moment we thought was private had been repackaged into something ugly and false. And all I could think was, how do you protect your child from someone who's rewriting reality? We were furious. We had been clear from the beginning photos of James were for her and Tom's dad only. No social media. No sharing. No exceptions. Tom called her immediately. His voice was calm but firm. "Mom, you need to take down every picture of James. Every video. And you need to post a public apology on Instagram. This isn't okay." She refused. "People need to know what you're doing to me," she said. "They need to see how you've cut me out." We tried to reason with her. "None of this is true," I said. "You're twisting everything. We're just trying to keep James safe." That's when she broke. She started crying hard, gasping sobs that made Tom go quiet. He tried to calm her down, tried to get her to stay on the line, but she wouldn't listen. She hung up. James started to fuss in my arms. He was hungry. We were exhausted. Our phones sat on the table, still glowing with notifications, but we couldn't look anymore. We decided to leave it alone for tonight at least. Tom said, "Let's try calling Dad tomorrow." Then came the morning. Someone was banging on our front door, hard, forceful, like they meant to break it down. I rushed to the tablet and pulled up the Ring camera. There she was. Alice. She looked terrible. Her skin was grayish, her eyes sunken. She was coughing deep, rattling coughs that made her double over. I called Tom over, panic rising in my chest. "Look," I said, shoving the tablet at him. He spoke through the camera, voice tight. "Mom, what are you doing?" She stopped, looked straight into the lens, and shook her head. "Of course you have spyware now," she snapped. "Let me in. Right now. Your father needs to lie down." Tom didn't flinch. "Mom, I can't do that. You need to go to the hospital. You're really sick." That's when she straightened up, shoulders back, chin lifted in defiance. "I am not sick," she said. "I've never felt better." Tom glanced at me, then back at the camera. His voice was low, steady. "Mom, you need to leave. Don't make me call the police. Please, go to the hospital." She exploded. "Call the police on me? I'll call the police on you," she shouted and stormed off down the driveway. We stood there, stunned, assuming or maybe hoping she'd go to the hospital. Tom turned to me, jaw clenched. "Stay here," he said. "I'll get your mom to help me sterilize everything she touched." And just like that, we were back in crisis mode. Again. We had just finished a light dinner. The house was quiet, James was sleeping soundly, his tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with the soft hum of the baby monitor. Tom and I were finally sitting down, plates cleared, the weight of the day beginning to settle. Then came a knock at the door. This time, it was polite. No pounding. No shouting. I glanced at the Ring camera and froze. 2 police officers stood on our porch, calm but serious. I called for Tom, and he answered the door. They introduced themselves gently, then got straight to the point. After leaving our house, Alice had gone to the police station. They didn't know why. She hadn't filed a report or spoken to anyone. But as she entered the building, both she and Tom's dad collapsed. Right there in the lobby. They were rushed to the hospital. The diagnosis, advanced COVID. We weren't shocked. Not really. We'd seen it coming. We explained everything to the officers, our concerns, the confrontation that morning, the footage from the Ring camera. Tom showed them her social media posts, the TikToks, the Instagram rants. They nodded, quietly absorbing it all. Before they left, one officer told us which hospital they'd been taken to. He gave us the name, then paused. "They're in good hands now," he said. We thanked him, closed the door, and stood in the silence. Part of us felt relief. They were finally getting help. Finally being seen by professionals who could care for them properly. But another part of us was afraid. What would happen when she was discharged? Or worse, what if she wasn't? Tom didn't say anything. He just reached for my hand, and together we stood in the dim light of the hallway, listening to James breathe through the monitor and wondering what came next. The next 2 weeks were tense. We reached out to family, shared the Ring footage, explained what had happened. They were in the hospital now, and we are getting daily updates from the doctors. It had been close, frighteningly close, but they were stable. Improving. We posted in a family group chat. Each morning brought a new report. Oxygen levels rising. Fevers breaking. The worst seemed to be behind them. One detail stood out. Tom's dad had signed himself out of the hospital the last time he was admitted. Against medical advice. We both knew Alice had convinced him to do it. That was her pattern: minimize, deflect, control. But this time it felt different. Then, one quiet afternoon, there was another knock at the door. A woman stood there, calm, professional, with a clipboard tucked under her arm. She introduced herself as a patient advocate. Mr. Boone had asked her to reach out, she explained to us. "He's recovering," she said gently. Slowly. "It's been a hard road, but he's lucid enough now to understand what's happening. And to be afraid." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He wanted me to tell you he's sorry. For everything. And he's scared to go home with his wife." There was a silence between us. Not shock, just a quiet confirmation of what we'd already suspected. Then she asked, would he be able to stay here once he's discharged? Tom and I didn't even glance at each other. We answered together. Yes. No hesitation. No second guessing. Because sometimes, healing doesn't begin with medicine. It begins with safety. With knowing you're not alone. And we could be that place. For him. The next month unfolded slowly, like a wound beginning to close. We found a rhythm, quiet, steady, almost fragile. Mornings started with coffee and baby coos. Evenings ended with soft lullabies and whispered check-ins. The chaos hadn't vanished, but it had dulled around the edges. Some family reached out. A few offered real apologies, awkward, but sincere. Others simply reacted to the group chat updates with a heart emoji or a thumbs up, too proud to say the words out loud. Still, it was something. A quiet acknowledgement that maybe we hadn't been the villains after all. John was improving. Each day, he seemed a little more present. He still moved slowly, still tired easily, but he was eating again, asking about James, even cracking the occasional dry joke. The man who had once built entire homes with his hands was now relearning how to hold a spoon without shaking, but he was trying. And that meant everything. Alice, though, was another story. Her recovery was uneven. We heard bits and pieces from the hospital, complications, resistance, silence. She hadn't reached out. We hadn't either. Meanwhile, my mom had moved back in with my dad. She called every few days, checking in, reminding us she was just a phone call away. Her voice was a balm, steady, grounding, familiar. One afternoon, Tom and I stood in the guest room, folding fresh sheets and fluffing pillows. We'd brought in a soft lamp, cleared space for his books, even set a small photo of James on the nightstand. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm. If he keeps getting better, Tom said, smoothing the blanket, he could come home next week. I nodded. And this time, home meant here with us. It wasn't the life we'd imagined. But it was safe. It was real. And it was ours. John came home on a Tuesday. The air felt different that morning, lighter, expectant. Tom had picked him up from the hospital while I stayed behind with James, pacing the living room like something important was about to happen. And it was. When they pulled into the driveway, I saw John through the passenger window, his face thinner, but his eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. He stepped out slowly, gripping Tom's arm for balance, and when he saw me, he smiled. Not a big smile, just the kind that says, I'm still here. We had the guest room ready, but he insisted on sitting in the kitchen first. I want to see the house, he said, voice gravelly but firm. So we walked him through, pointing out the little changes we'd made. He nodded at everything, even the new photo of James on the fridge. He's grown, he said softly. That night, after James was asleep and the house had settled into its new rhythm, John asked if he could help with dinner the next day. Even if it's just peeling carrots, he said. I need to feel useful. And he did. Every day, a little more. He was slow, yes, and sometimes frustrated with his own limits, but he was present. He was trying. And that mattered more than anything. Alice, though, was still in the hospital. Her progress was jagged, like climbing a mountain only to slide back down every few steps. Alice only accepted treatment when she had no choice, when she was unconscious or too disoriented to protest. The moment she came to, realized where she was, she wanted out. Her voice, when she used it, was sharp and brittle. I don't belong here, she'd say. She did this to me. She refused to speak with us. Calls went unanswered. Letters were returned unopened. It wasn't just resistance, it was rejection. She insisted I was the reason she'd ended up in the hospital, that I'd betrayed her somehow. There was no reasoning with her. No way in. John worried, of course. But more than anything, he missed the woman she used to be. The Alice who used to hum while she folded laundry, who made cornbread from scratch and always knew when someone needed a hug. That Alice felt like a memory now, faded, flickering, fragile. Sometimes, after James was asleep and the house had gone quiet, John and I would sit at the kitchen table and talk about the old days. About camping trips and birthday parties, about the time Alice tried to build a treehouse and ended up with a pile of lumber and a splinter in her thumb. We'd laugh, gently, and then fall silent. I keep thinking, John said once, staring into his tea, maybe if she gets better, she'll come back. I didn't have the heart to tell him that healing doesn't always bring people back. That sometimes, the person you love is lost in a place you can't reach. But I nodded. Maybe, I said. Maybe someday. Then the worst happened. It was early morning when the phone rang, too early for anything but bad news. I answered, heart already sinking, and heard the words I'll never forget. Alice had removed her own ventilator during the night. She'd fought the nurses, refused to let them put it back on. She died fighting them. We cried. All of us. John broke down in a way I hadn't seen before, his body shaking, his voice cracking like something inside him had finally given way. I held him, and we sat in silence, letting the grief settle into the corners of the house. But then, a few days later, the autopsy report came. They found a tumor in her frontal lobe. A brain tumor, likely growing for months, maybe longer. The doctors said it could explain everything: the erratic behavior, the paranoia, the emotional volatility. It wasn't just trauma. It wasn't just resistance. Her brain had been under siege, and none of us knew. It didn't make the loss easier. But it gave us something we hadn't had before: clarity, closure, a reason. John read the report twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside his bed. She wasn't herself, he said quietly. She didn't mean it. Now, we try to remember her before 2020. Before the confusion and the hospital stays. Before the fear. We remember her laugh, her stubbornness, her love for lemon pie and old jazz records. We remember the way she used to dance in the kitchen when no one was watching. We remember the woman who built a life with her bare hands and held it together for as long as she could. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment, like, or share. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone. Families are complicated. Grief is messy. And healing rarely follows a straight line. But love, real love, finds a way to hold steady through the storm. Stay strong.